Welcome to the fucking Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week it's Smoke Week on the podcast. And the reason for that is twofold. First and foremost, I just received a Traeger Ironwood 850 grill. Now, if you listen to the show, you know I love how easy my Traeger 570 makes it to work the smoker like a barbecue master. And I did love that grill. But this new Ironwood is next level for me. So it's a smoke week because I like to smoke the shit out of everything. And I will say, Traeger and that first grill they sent me, it helped save me during the pandemic. Not only did I make incredible food, it gave us something to look forward to, and it also gave me a new hobby. But now my new hobby is upgraded, as this Ironwood is next level. It's got insulated walls for the 4-season grilling that I'm always doing. It connects to my phone so I can put on a brisket, fly to Salt Lake City, high-five the Traeger guys, get right back to the airport, fly home, and that whole time I can be monitoring the temperature of my grill and the meat because my Ironwood is high-tech shit. I put my first pork butt on the grill at 5 a.m. this morning, and this pork-eating Jew is ready for the ass, aka shoulder, tonight. And for those of you that don't have a Traeger, you should treat yourself to a grill this season. Your family and friends will thank you. And after you buy your grill, you may as well sign up for TGR Premium, as you're going to need something to do while your Traeger does all the work for you. I use my access to this platform to prep for podcasts on a weekly basis. You'll get all the movies TGR's ever made, discounts on their goggles and other merchandise. It's a pretty sweet deal that you can get over at tetongravity.com/premium. Now, the final reason I'm calling this week Smoke Week is because of my guest. And while I don't hang out with him much anymore, when we did hang, he was like 15 years younger than me, and he smoked more weed than anyone. He also had the whole ski world in front of him, waiting for him to grab his seat on the pro ski bus. But taking what is waiting for you? Well, maybe that's not exactly Rory Silva's style. He does things his own way. And for a while, I was really worried about the dude. Like he might not make it. But after this chat, I feel really good about where Rory's at. And that's awesome. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to do a few things for me. The first is tell people about the podcast. These things aren't easy to find, especially with a name like the Powell Movement. But if you tell someone they will like it, 9 out of 10 times they do, and they'll listen to a lot more podcasts. So please do that for me. And if anyone asks on social what's a good podcast for them to listen to, well, you can tag the Powell Movement. Don't be afraid. I also want to grow my Instagram. And to help there, just follow the Powell Movement. It's pretty easy. Finally, I want to thank my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Rollerblade, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Elon Skis. Now, let's talk to the Rory Silva. I'm going to find out what you're doing on the podcast. I'm not going to ask you about it now, but you're doing well? Like you're happy, healthy, all that good stuff?
Yeah, everything seems to be really good. Fucking work life is amazing. Getting to go ski and do things, going to the gym, started golfing, all that shit.
Nice. Well, I'm going to jump into it because I wanted to have you on 420 week, as I know weed plays a big part in your life, and it has for as long as I've known you, I feel like. That didn't happen. But I know you've worked in the weed business for some time, and what is it that you do?
Now I work with a company that we mostly just grow seeds, mostly CBD seeds. There in the future, there will be more THC seeds, but right now just kind of playing with growing a lot of seeds. We still do stuff with flower and have maybe 17 acres here that we do mostly test runs and R&D bullshit, and then have like 10 greenhouses that we do the same thing where we kind of run a bit of R&D and test flowers things in and keep stuff alive when we're doing seed production on the indoors.
Wow. And has your work in the weed business, has it always been legal, or is that something that's happened in the past like 5-6 years?
No, probably like the last 3 or 4 years. I know like it sounds insane to most people, but it's so nice to be able to pay taxes and have a regular job where you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. And of course the pay is different, but it's very nice having a regular job and like that security of like, fuck, this sucks because I'm doing what normal people do, but it's also not that bad.
Yeah. Well, you know, in working in the illegal times when that kind of stuff happened, because I'm sure there was business that you were doing there and the growing and cultivation of it. Did you ever run into situations where people were coming to like come to your farm and take your shit?
I've ran into police showing up and doing such a thing. And I did the whole Northern California thing and checked it out, and then did Southern Oregon for almost 6 years. And like, you always hear about down there where there would be these certain people or families or things going on where they would straight up dress up like cops and go to people's property and just raid the fuck and steal everything. And also just people showing up and robbing people. And I've heard and been around it. It's just never personally happened to me so bad.
So you've been lucky.
Very fortunate.
And I would think you see crazy dubs rolled as well when the weed is just like as much as you possibly ever want. What's the biggest doob you've ever seen in your life?
Probably realistically, like in Amsterdam or at like some weed festival shit and Barcelona style. But like at home, I guess there's a lot of weed around and things like that. And even like last year, it was so funny because now doing all the CBD shit, it happened to a point where I like went to find a jar of weed and couldn't find one and was like, holy shit, is this what's going to happen in life? Because for so long, there was so much weed around everywhere you looked. And now it's like doing the stuff with CBD things and with seeds. And there's so much CBD here to smoke. And I have stuff that looks like real weed. It just isn't.
Do you smoke CBD?
I recently started mixing it with weed and tobacco just because we happen to have some of them that taste so amazing that it like makes everything taste better. And you still have like good weed and stuff that tastes great, but like mixing all three together seemed to be the recent kick I'm on.
Yeah, well, I'm going to trust your research as I know that you've experimented with many different variations. And if you found that to work, I'm sure it does. But you don't start out smoking weed. I think you're born in like Irvine or something like that. But you pretty much grow up in Mammoth and you're born to ski. Like your folks met at a bar at Apres while they were working at the resorts. And are your parents pretty good athletes when it comes to skiing and snowboarding and stuff? I know your dad's way ahead of the curve when it came to snowboarding and water skiing and all that crap.
My dad's super like, and still now he's like getting older and like he's got beat up ankles and legs, but there's still times where I'll go do stuff with him and be like, fuck, I want to go drink a beer. And like now it's nice because we can all go have a beer and talk about things. But there were times when I was younger where it was like, you just keep going. And a lot of people in life all the time will come do stuff like either work things or going to do stuff. And I either really like sitting or I like not sitting whatsoever.
From when I met you in probably like 2003, when you say you like sitting and you don't like sitting at all, it's like Ryan Schmeez and I lived together. You would come to our house. You would chill out and like not move from the couch rolling dubs for like 6 hours. But then you would go skate for like 4 hours and you were either doing one or the other, but there was no anything in between for you.
Yeah, and it's still kind of the same way where like if it's the day off from work, it's like either we go ski all day or I like literally do nothing. I don't even like smoke weed. I literally will lay at my girlfriend's house and sit there and be like, she's like, oh, we should go on a walk. And I'm like, walking? Like, why the hell would you go on a walk right now?
Hearing that you have a girlfriend, I believe you had one for a while, and I think she's a lot more clean cut than yourself, because if someone's listening to the podcast now and they haven't seen Rory, while I met you with no tattoos, you probably have, what, hundreds now?
Yeah, it was funny because we were trying to discuss it the other day. Like, I wonder how many tattoos I have. And I've tried to like count and maybe like single tattoos, it's well over 30. But then there's so many places where they all just kind of one runs into the other.
So it's 30 really thought out pieces that are done, and it's not just like little stuff here and there?
I bet 30 thought out tattoos and probably 20 tattoos that are either like little teeny quick ones, either being drunk with friends or like I did tattoo on my legs for a little while, seeing if I could become a tattoo artist. And they all just look like everyone who's ever tattooed on their own legs.
Well, I've seen some of your art that you've done in whatever house that you live in. It seems like you're able to just totally paint and do whatever you want in this place. And while a lot of the stuff you do is dark, it's all pretty amazing stuff. And did your art just not come out in tattoo? Like you're a good artist, but you can't make it work in that medium?
I think it's sick like painting stuff in the house because where I move now, like I said, I live just literally off the farm where I work, and it was kind of an older house where they had to rebuild it, and no one really wanted to live there. And then all of a sudden I was like, fuck, like if we put a roof on the thing and paint it a little bit, and then they kind of painted it. And then during all the COVID shit, they were like, you're diabetic, Rory. You should not go to the store. You should not do this and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you'll go to the store for me and do things? And they're like, yeah. And I like literally like wrote a random list of like cigarettes, beer, like random food things, Oreos, and all this shit, and gave them like $500. And they came back and gave me $26 change and a receipt being like, sorry, we couldn't get you this and this. And I was like, do you guys really want to do this for me? And I made it almost 6 weeks without leaving the property, you know, like when all the COVID stuff first started, because I was like, well, I don't know what's going on. And we have to work every day almost. And I would leave the property, but I would go to like the skate park, you know?
Yeah. We're not going to talk about all of that anymore right now. I guess we're going to go back to your childhood. You have a brother, Bo, and it's yourself. You're born to ski, like we say, so you get put in the Mighty Mites program. Racing when you're growing up, like J4 and J5 stuff is like the furthest that you get. So you're like 10 or 11 when you finish your race career. But when I think of you, I don't think of you ever in a speed suit. I don't think you should ever be racing. And I don't think you would take well to the structure around it. But how did you do in the race world?
When I was little, like I was really good at 5th through 8th place. But I also was like the only kid without a downhill suit. And I don't know if we like just didn't have one or if I was just so against it. I remember going to a race in Kirkwood wearing a downhill suit and I got like 3rd or 4th place. And I was like, okay, maybe this is something. But then right at the same time, I was like 12 or 13. And that's when all the Canadian Air Force guys came up. But like before that, it was completely all Mighty Mites, like going skiing 5 days a week at least. And then right afterwards, like J1, 2, and 3. Maybe like 3 is where we stopped. Or I don't, maybe it's J5 and J4. I guess it goes backwards. But I did that stuff and I was really liked racing. I just wasn't as fast as the other kids, you know. But I would also like ski my skis into the parking lot.
Racing, it's not like a cheap thing for people to do. And if you're skiing your skis in the parking lot, that kind of sucks too if you actually care about the gear. But it sounds like you don't. But is there any money in the Silva family? I think your dad's a home builder, and is that like something that goes well with the market, and it all depends on the state of the market at that point?
It was sick because like we never had like a lot of money. Like everyone in Mammoth made so much money. And when I was a little kid, we just had the ASB card and passes. And then we got skis and stuff on Christmas and stuff like that. And things were awesome, you know, but then it was like just as surprising at the same time because I got skis when I was like 12 or 13 from K2. And like, then I got to show up with skis for everyone, you know?
Yep.
We were never bad off at all. And like my dad still builds houses and my mom, she mostly always did like bookkeeping and she's worked every job in the world, but she's amazing too.
Okay. And I think through your dad, you end up spending a lot of time with like the most famous skier on the planet, Glen Plake. What's the backstory between like you guys and the Plakes?
Literally like some random dude that was like my dad's bro. And then I remember one day like going to school and someone else bringing up who Glen Plake was and like maybe giving us a poster or something for them to sign and like going in the garage with it for him to sign it. And I think that was like the only moment with Plake where we were ever like, damn, he is like now I think of him as a superstar. But like when we were a little kid, it was just when someone else first told us. And then like we would get to go on all these cool things. And then always like my dad would be stuck with him on Christmas, like hiking some weird chute in Mammoth. Or like my mom and Kimberly, I think always got along pretty well, but they were just always around us. And we had ended up being in Benton for a while on a tournament water ski lake. And now me and my brother always talk about how we wish we would have been into it. Because my dad like helped him kind of build the lake. So he was always just part of it. And then he ended up selling the piece of property he had out there. But he ended up selling it to Plake. And I don't think Plake has it anymore. But he's such a good water skier and anything in the world with the word skis in it, that guy can do.
And were you water skiing a lot back then too? Was that something that you were passionate about or no?
I think we always wanted to wakeboard, and I never was good. I've probably made like one or two 15 off passes in like my life, like never have even kind of been a good water skier.
So what else are you doing? Are there any team sports in your life, or is it just like skateboarding and eating bad food?
No, I love soccer until probably ninth or 10th grade. At that time, you could argue with the coaches. And I would always be on the teams with everyone being Hispanic. So it would always be like everyone would make jokes and make fun of me, but they were all like my friends because I was always in all the ESL classes. I don't know why.
You were in ESL?
From like kindergarten to like fifth or sixth grade, I was always in the class with all the Spanish kids.
Did you ever tell them like English is not my second language? Like it's my first?
Yeah. And there would always be like a handful of white kids where their mom was just like, oh, put him in here because he'll learn more with the Spanish kids than he will with all these idiots.
And this is like the late 90s. So when you decide to quit racing, you're like 11 or 12 years old. It's like the J5 days. And is there like your parents bummed that you quit, or is it something that they're totally cool with, that you don't have any real activity anymore?
No, it was awesome because there was a store in Mammoth called Footloose Sports, and the owners of that, Tony and Andrea, were like my mom and dad's best friend, and like their kids, Mikey and Daniela, were like mine and Bo's age, and we were always around each other. And then Jeff Darby and Jeff Anderson are two like reps for California for K2 stuff forever, for my whole life. And like they showed up when I was like a little kid, and it was like pipeline skis, and they ended up being like, here are skis, you can do this. And so my parents at the same time, instead of being bummed on racing at all, they were just so excited. I think that I've found like a new way to be excited about skiing.
You saw your future right there, like, whoa, people believe in me this young in a totally different aspect of the sport. Like, this is pretty cool.
Just it was like they were like, if you want to go do these few little jump around things. And it was so funny because at that time it was like I'd get invited to gravity games and then overshoot this jump and break my face, and then do like three other things, and everyone would be like, oh, this kid's amazing, and then show up at another one and like overshoot the jump and break my rib.
Gravity Games is like 99 in Mammoth, I feel like. So that eventually comes to your hometown. But before that even happens, a lot of stuff is going on in your life. Like, you've mentioned that you're diabetic, and I think you're in 7th grade when you get that diagnosis. And how does that even happen? Are you feeling like shit one day and you like go to your parents and you're like, I just don't feel right, and they take you to the hospital and you figure it out?
No, it was crazy because there was like maybe a week to almost 2 weeks where I just remember I was drinking like literally like 3 gallons of water. I would get like 32-ounce cups of water and drink the whole thing and refill it right away, and was like, that's crazy. And pissing a bunch. And then all of a sudden I got really sick. And I think I got food poisoning in the middle. And I always thought it was like Carl's Jr. gave me food poisoning. And I was like, I got diabetes. But looking back on it, I was like all drinking water. And they say it just comes from some illness, like type 1 diabetes. When you're passed down genetically, it's in your body and just waiting to happen. And it technically comes from people being type 2 diabetic and having children.
Well, when you get that, like, you're pretty young. You've already got, like, K2 giving you skis. I think you're getting stuff from Smith and maybe Spider. So, like, I don't know if you're a cocky young kid, but you've got to be an excited young kid that, like, has the world in the palm of your hands. And then this all happens, and you're like, holy shit. I would think that you're like, holy shit, I'm going to die. Like, everything's going to change. Are you totally worried about what's going to happen when you get that diagnosis?
I remember being worried, but even with the ski stuff, I was always such like not a worrier, but like someone who was like always kind of stood back until they were called on, sort of thing. And like never wanted to be like, oh, I could do that. I would let everyone else randomly hit things and then like randomly get invited and be like, oh, this is, I guess, how that works.
That's almost to a fault in your career that you didn't assert yourself more, but that's like a different thing that'll probably come up later.
Yeah, it's just something. I just remember like T and CR and Pep right before dub ski, like when I first got to start traveling around. Maybe I did good at a couple contests or something. And I think we went to Amsterdam or something like that. And I was just like stone little kid in the corner, and they kept calling me Lost Puppy. And I remember getting so bummed out on it.
Because you're a few years younger than those guys. And when do you start smoking weed? Like, when does that happen? And when does it start happening heavily? Does that all like progress really quick?
No, that was real funny too, because I'd smoked weed And I was like a little kid, like probably like 14 or maybe 13. And the first person who ever smoked weed with me was Brian Lundgren and C.R. Johnson. And I was up in Canada for like Camp of Champions, but I was there with Spider to do something. And they brought me to get high. And I remember I didn't really get high. And then that year, I think, was when the Gravity Games was. And Mikkel showed up. And Mikkel didn't even speak English. And he was just like, why do you put so much tobacco? And like, he couldn't even say that, but then rolled a spliff. And I was like, whoa, this motherfucker just put a cigarette in his weed. And now he's got this huge ass joint instead of this little joint. Like, I think he's smart as fuck. And like, I never once have rolled a joint since.
Now it's time for a sponsor break, and the 10 Barrel Brewery is such an amazing brand. They totally get all things ski, snowboard, bike, and dogs. Yep, man and women's best friend are not only loved by 10 Barrel, they're now going to be sponsored by the brand. 10 Barrel is putting together the first ever brewery team of sponsored dogs, and here is how to get your dog sponsored by 10 Barrel. First, post a video of your pup doing their best trick or their favorite sport on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Second, follow 10 Barrel Brewing Company and use hashtag GoodSitSquad, hashtag 10 Barrel, and hashtag contest in your post. Third, make sure your profile is public so they can see it. The 10 Barrel team of professional athletes, all the badass skiers and snowboarders that they sponsor, well, they are going to judge the pet competitors on their athleticism, style, and personality to find 4 of the best for the 21-22 season. Perks include a year's supply of Good Pup Sit Ale, $100 to spend at Roughwear, and $1,000 cash for the human. 10 Barrel's accepting submissions until May 24th, and the winners will be picked on May 26th. To see if your dog has what it takes, head on over to 10barrel.com/goodsit. My next sponsor is Stanley. You know, the brand famous for inventing the category of keeping things hot and cold way back in 1913. It's that green bottle that your grandpa used to keep his coffee hot. Well, it's camping season, and Stanley has the best, most innovative products to make your adventure better. And I'm going to save you money on your purchase. Here's what you need to do to get the discount. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and make sure to include a set of pint glasses, which are my favorite. And when you check out, you're going to save 30%. That's right, 30%. All you need to do is enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and if you spend $100, I'll send you a collectible Powell Movement beanie. My final sponsor this break is Rollerblade. Yes, inline skating is back. Actually, it never went anywhere, and it's one of the best full-body workouts out there, especially for skiers and snowboarders. Why? Inline skating not only burns about as many calories as biking and running does in an hour, but compared to a bike, inline is the no-hassle option. You don't need a rack, and you can travel with them. And you can't even compare inline to running based on the punishment that running puts on your knees. Plus, inline skating is super fun. To find out more about the inline skates, check out rollerblade.com, or you can get their award-winning Ski-to-Skate app over on the App Store. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you get diagnosed with diabetes, you just have bad eating habits. And I say that jokingly, but not really, because like you're one of those dudes that doesn't eat fruit, doesn't eat vegetables, and if it's green, you only smoke it.
And it's crazy because when I was little, it was just textures of things that I couldn't swallow and eat anything. So I literally just ate bread, cheese, and Doritos and fuckloads of candy. But I didn't start really eating the candy till after I got diabetes. And then I was like, well, they say you're going to get diabetes if you eat candy. Like, this shit's fucking good. I'm going to eat candy. Like, the problem with me, like, people do it all the time where they're like, how the fuck are you going to eat that? I'm like, I'm going to take more insulin, you idiot. And luckily, I don't sit around as much as I move. But I could be the roundest person in the world for, like, how I still... And now I eat so much better than you have ever seen. Like, I'll eat salad and I'll go eat sushi and random, like, good people things. And I don't eat any milk or cheese shit anymore.
Huh.
And it took a long time for me to get that through my head that's why I always felt sick.
Yeah, I mean, you have diabetes. Are you constantly, from the time you're 11 or 12 on, are you constantly having to prick yourself and give yourself shots and being that, like, weird kid that always has to do that stuff?
That was the weirdest thing when they were like, you're diabetic, and I got diagnosed. I knew this one girl who was diabetic, and she was like artsy weird girl for 7th grade. But I was like, Emily's weird. I don't want to be weird like Emily. And then she ends up being like a great person and they're like great family friends. But at the time, I just was like, oh gosh, it's just going to be me and Emily hanging out forever, you know? She hangs out with all the high school kids. I don't even hang out with the high school kids. And then got diabetes and like forever, I never took my shots in front of anyone. And like, I just really luckily always have had really good, like I've had a 7.7 A1C one time. That's not that unhealthy. Like 7.0 is like what they say diabetics should go for. But when I was little, they said you needed it lower. And I just always have been so lucky where I'm like, if I eat this much food, I take this much insulin. And like always, even with drinking, I know I take less insulin because my body produces less sugar. And on nights where you're like, I'm going to, like, you go eat dinner, you take half the insulin you're supposed to, and your blood still wakes up at 48.
Most of that doesn't make sense to me, but I've never had to monitor my blood, so I'm going to trust you on that stuff. But your world gets crazy when you get that diagnosis because you're shooting yourself up all the time, and that's just got to be a wild thing. And it's like, you were pretty clean cut at that point. If you had an agent, you could have gotten some huge exposure and been maybe the face of diabetes. That really isn't the track that you're going to be on. The track was for you to be the future of skiing at that point. And travel, is that when it really starts ramping up, when you're like 14, 15, 16 years old? Are you getting on tons of planes and your parents just like, good luck, Rory?
Yeah, and my parents were so cool because it was like literally I came home from getting diabetes and we went to hit this wind lip and I had learned backflips that day. Then all of a sudden I was like, well, if you can do backflips, then a week later you learned how to do D-spins. And then like all of a sudden one thing turns into the other. And then K2 sent me to Japan and told my mom, called her and was like, we want to bring him to Japan. And I went to Japan and maybe 9 days or 8 days into it, they called her and were like, we don't know what the fuck to do. He won't eat salad. He just keeps eating Doritos. And it was like awesome. And I got to do a bunch of really fun little trips like that. And then I did good at a couple of contests in Switzerland. And then a couple years later, got to go with K2 for a few years there. And like, that was all in between like 14 and 19, I think.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot in your contest life was like maybe like 2002 to 2004, and it's your last couple years on K2. And when you get invited to the X Games, it's like you're a derelict Rory in clean-cut Rory look and feel. People haven't seen the real Rory yet because you're young, and I don't know where I'm going with this. But you're at the X Games. Is that something that's mind-blowing? Because just a year or two ago, the new Canadian Air Force and everything starts blowing up. And like, how involved are you as a Grom with the whole scene? Are you watching the Poor Boys videos and stuff?
Well, that's what the craziest thing was because Super Park for snowboarders was at Mammoth, and that was the first year they let skiers come. And so it was like Falou and Vinny and Douglas and like those Canadian guys. And I was just a little kid. And then Tanner and stuff always around like when I was a little kid. And so it was like right when X Games started, I like went to San Diego maybe when like CR and all them got to hit the big air jump. Maybe it was in LA, sorry. And I remember just being jealous and so bummed out that I didn't get to do it. And then when I finally went to X Games, just being so bummed out that I got like sixth place and being like, there's so many things that you could have done better, you know?
Yep.
And like, I don't ever remember being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm here. I just always remember being like, fuck, I should have done this.
And that's 2003. You end up with seventh in that year. Then the next year, in year two of your X Games, you make the finals again and you end up in 10th. And that second year, do you end up crashing in both runs in the finals or something? Is that how you get 10th?
One year I did okay in finals. And then the next year I fell on a 450, 270, 2 runs in a row on like a flat down rail.
Yeah, so that was the second year that you did that. And they ended up in 10th. But with a contest, when you're getting ready, you're at the start gate and they're like, Rory, are you ready? In 3, 2, 1, Rory Silva is on course. Do you get nervous? Like, are you really good when you're skiing in practice and everything comes together? And then does like your heart rate get up and you get really nervous when it's time for you to drop in on a contest run? Or is it no big deal to you?
I remember more getting nervous at US Open and Vail. I just remember that one being the only thing ever that I remember like each run before, like wondering if I knew how to do the trick that I did 10 runs in a row before. But at least X Games and Gravity Games and the big air ones. And it could have always been like 17 to probably 20-ish. Like we always were drinking beers and just smiling and enjoying. And like that could have been a problem as much as it was helpful for not being scared, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, weed's always been a part of your lifestyle, like we said, or not always, but it came early on in life. And that is one of the things that can make you chill out at the event, but it also probably isn't the best in terms of making you compete to your best ability. But are you the type of dude that when you do get 10th and you crash twice in your run, are you pissed off, or are you able to just let that roll off your shoulder and it's not a big deal?
No, I would always like go back to Mammoth and learn some stupid, like just try things until they work better. But I think like it was mostly at that time I would get pissed off and then go try like double backflip and switch backflip and like weird switch double, like all just weird flip things off of weird shit. And then I think eventually that made it so I could spin better. But I would just go home and go ride with snowboarders and like be like, okay, these are the jumps we want to hit. And then I just always would be bummed out. Like, how do you mess up a trick that you do 500 runs in a row at Mammoth every day?
Right.
And then you like go to an event and you're like, this rail's smaller. Like, how did I fall?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there is pressure in a contest environment. But when you think about riding with snowboarders and just riding with the people in Mammoth, who was that crew that you were with?
Well, when I was really little, it was like all the Crowley crew kids, like John and Eric Jackson and Kirk and Steven. And like, then those eventually turned into like Downey and Hammer and Capco and a little older crew of snowboarders that moved to Mammoth when I was like maybe 10 to 14-ish. And then right when I was like 16, it was like all the Grenade kids were there. And we did all the Grenade stuff and hung out with them till we were probably like 19 or 20. And then me and a big group of friends just moved to Portland.
You named a ton of snowboarders as well. Were you riding with Ben Chetler and people like that as well?
I mostly rode with Ben Chetler's older brother, Peter, just because Chris was like a year younger than me and Peter was a year older. And he mostly hung out with all the Crowley crew kids. And they were from Bishop when they were real little. So I would hang out with Chris and we would ski. But like, I remember like all of a sudden showing up when I was like 17 or 18 and being like, holy fuck, when did Chris learn to ski? Because when we were little, I just remember him being Pete's little brother, you know? And like, he was always been the same kind of dude where he's just really good person and like down to try anything, but like so more calm than maybe I was when I was younger.
Calm, but he was always motivated and still is.
Yeah, insane motivation. Like he was already going to the gym and painting the world.
Yeah. So a huge part of your career is dubski. And that's a video that you film with Iberg, and it has Tanner, Pollard, Pep, Kai, Mikkel, Dash, Sean Pettit. I mean, it's a who's who of skiing, and it's your one big video part, it seems like, in your career. And how involved
it's the
are
only
you?
one.
Yeah. How involved are you first with like putting it together?
It was sick because it was Iberg, and Iberg was the one who like everything in skiing always was like, just put Rory on, he'll be okay. And Armada and stuff was like, I don't know, he's not our kind of look. And then like other companies and like other video stuff, and he always just had my back. And then when he was making his own video, he's like, you can have a part and we'll do this. Because I think the year before I was like, where Parkosaurus and Super Park were right in a row, and I just came back and did a bunch of cool guy things, so everyone was super excited. And then the next year made it easy to get K2 to throw a little money, I would assume, and other people. And it was the first time I ever got to like, they're like, oh, you're going to go up to Timberline and do this, and you're going to go hit this jump. And like, all I ever did was go to Mammoth and then go to US Open and X Games.
Yeah, and I mean, in that part, everything's just super floaty. There's always like a last-second 180 and all your tricks. I mean, just a style that was really unique to you. But like you say, it was your only segment of your career. And I look at like it clicks with Iberg because A, he knows skiing and he knows kind of what you bring to the table. But Iberg also smokes just as much weed as you do. So it's like you guys are a match made in heaven to be traveling around. And then in the editing process, are you with Iberg and coming up with the idea? Because when you think of your video part, it is one of the darkest parts in skiing, almost like in ski history.
Yeah, for sure. Because Iberg, like, he's like, that's the only one that I've ever done where people just left during your part. And I was like, I never even thought of that stuff because Iberg just came up with the idea of it. And I was like, fuck yeah, everyone's going to have their own thing. And then when it came out, I thought it was awesome. But then I missed the premiere for Dubski. So I was there when they edited the whole thing, but then just never watched the thing again, you know? And now I have because it's on the internet.
Yep.
But like I sat there with Shane was the one who edited the whole thing. And I remember being like a little kid, like on mushrooms, like sitting there running around Tanner's house trying to see what we were doing and fucking asking Shane about editing it and just thinking it was the raddest thing in the world.
Because for people who haven't seen it, and I'm guessing it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Pretty much, it seems like a girl's cheating on you. I don't know if you kill the boyfriend or whatever, but then you're like eating brains. It's like not part of a ski movie. It's very, very strange. But for your one video part that you have all your sponsors pitching into, what do they say when that part comes out? Do you ever hear back from them like, hey, Rory, what the fuck were you thinking?
No, none of them ever even talked to me again. I don't. Then it was so funny because the video came out, and then I went to Switzerland with K2, and then the video came out in October, and then it was like October, November, December. I never heard from them again, and was like, oh, bummer. And I didn't even think about it being the movie, like I said, because I just didn't pay attention, and I don't think anyone was that bummed out at the movie, but they probably just were like, dang, this is not what we were hoping. Like, yeah, I should have gone with like a bunch of flowers and shit, but no one would ever talk about it again.
Well, I think of it as like, if you didn't come up with that concept, Iberg sabotaged your career unwillingly, because putting that part out and then you not being the most assertive dude in the world, like you have K2 and Bolé that have commercials like butt ending the video part. So everybody knows that you're their athlete.
Bolé was still the shit for a while. Like, I forgot, Bolé stuck around for a while, but it was just them.
So K2 didn't get back to you, and I wasn't the team manager in this time. You would just stay at my house. So that ended up being a nightmare for you because you end up losing sponsors, and who knows the reason. But really, when you were a young athlete coming up, it seemed like you had no guidance. Like you were the guy who wasn't going to collect on his photo incentives because you weren't going to send in the pictures from the magazine. But it's not really your fault when you become pro at like 13, 14 years old and your parents aren't involved at all. Was it no agent, no anything, just you doing it?
Yeah, and my parents also, like, they just built houses and like lived in the mountains and like not saying nothing one way or another. But I think a lot of wealthier kids, their parents, like if they make $100, and my parents didn't not pay attention, you know, it was like, we had no clue. Like there was so many years afterwards where I'd be like, what do you mean travel? What do you photo incentive? I was like, I had a photo in every magazine this year. Don't you guys just give me money? Like, what the fuck? And they'd be like, you didn't send it by this date. And you'd be like, well, send what? You have the magazine.
That was the thing back then. It was so analog as like we wouldn't have all the magazines because you could be in Bravo Ski and you could be in all these things in Europe. So it was the athlete's responsibility to send in the ad and be like, hey, pay me for this, pay me for this, pay me for this, and produce what you did because there was no tracking it on the internet or anything like that. And you're young, you're not doing those things at that point. So it's kind of like you were robbed in that respect too because you didn't have any guidance, which kind of sucks for you, but you're living the life and traveling the world. And the team that you're on at K2, I'm looking at the KISS poster that K2 never put out because KISS said they were going to sue the shit out of K2.
Yeah, they're the best at suing people.
Yeah, they really are.
And the Beatles are in second, and that's the other poster they tried to do the same weekend.
And then Iron Maiden as well, and K2 paid out the ass for that one. Eventually, they did a licensed product with Iron Maiden, and it was legit. But that team, when I look at the poster, it is Seth Morrison, Pep Fujas, Rory Silva, Sean Pettit, and Mark Abma. And did you really never figure out why the whole K2 thing ended? Did you never talk to the people that you were in contact with back then?
Like, I've seen Goo, and maybe I've seen Matura, but yeah, no one's really ever said anything. And it's so funny because, like, random skier people have been like, oh, yeah, they just say fuck you. And I was like, oh, yeah, I always heard it. But it was so funny because that was the only reason we even got good at skiing, was because K2 just always did. And then when they were like, oh, well, we don't give a fuck about you, I was like, well, then I don't fucking care about skiing. Like, like I like skiing and I'm okay at it, but I'm not going to try that hard if no one else, like, if you don't get shit, I don't.
It's time for another sponsor break, and now that ski and snowboard season is over, Peter Glen doesn't stop. They're the one-stop shop for all of your summer needs. You want a pair of inline skates, a wakeboard? Peter Glen has it and has had it for over 70 years. They are a mom-and-pop group of shops that do a great job competing with the cutthroat online guys, but still offer a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders of over $50, and a no-hassle return policy. They support a lot of great things in action sports, this podcast, Johnny Mosley, and so much more. So when you go shopping, please check out peterglen.com to get some of the best prices and the greatest variety of products on the internet. My final sponsor is Elan Skis, and I will say that I've noticed a lot of Elan on the hill this year. And every time I see someone on Elans, I ask them what they think about their skis, and they all rave about them, me included. I'm part of that cult following that Elan is building here in the States, and it's being built because of quality. You can feel the quality in every turn, and you can see it in their product. While ski season may be over for most, there's always next year, and you are going to need new skis. And when you're thinking about skiing this off-season and checking out products online, head on over to elanskis.com and you can see what the best choices out there are. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You're not going to be the dude that's going to go out and find another ski brand. So does Ninth Ward, are you just like sitting next to a dude somewhere who's like, hey, I'm run Ninth Ward, and you end up on that program?
Yeah, exactly. It was just like sitting around, and then they were making stuff, and I had already kept getting skateboards from them. And then I was like, well, called K2 for like 2 weeks and didn't get a phone call, and then was sitting there and was like, I'll try these skis. And then maybe it was like as short as like a week or 2 weeks. And then they like asked me, and I was like, fuck, I think K2's done. Like, I don't know what's going on. And it was like 4 years that I just rode around on Ninth Ward, but that's still when I had to like work and do other random jobs.
Was there a time where you didn't have to work at all and skiing was the only income and you could pay the bills that way?
Like till like 20, But like right when you really become an adult, I had no ski money. So it was just, I was a good skier, but I always like kind of think I definitely wasn't really a pro skier, because pro skiers at least live off of it and do things, Like I always just made enough money doing contests and random things. And like maybe if I paid attention to contracts and shit like that easier, I do it better now. Like I eat fucking vegetables now. I just didn't do it then.
Yeah. You were just a kid back then who just wanted to live in the moment and didn't give a shit about anything else.
And I think like then too, it wasn't like everything was everywhere, how you just said, where it was like really easy just to be like, well, this will be over soon. Who cares? Like everyone I know who's the best snowboarder or the best skateboarder I've ever seen is like working at Roberto's or something.
To be able to not have to work at Roberto's, you have to put a lot more effort, I feel like, into every aspect of being a pro. And, you definitely weren't putting all that effort into it. You're doing enough to be able to get what you wanted out of it, which was great. You end up on Ninth Ward. And once you get on Ninth Ward, is that like right when you break your leg as well?
Well, no, I broke both my legs in a row right before dub ski, where I like caught a stair at Parkosaurus trying to like 270 on a rail and broke my left foot. And then the first day I could ski, I overshot a hip at Mammoth doing a 5 and just landed on my right leg, and it just bent right above my ski boot.
Oh, man.
I've broken my ankle skateboarding, but I think that was probably in the middle of dub ski. I think I broke my wrist then. I've broken my wrist twice and my ankles together like 5 times. When I was little, I was always in a sling and shit.
I would think contracts with Ninth Ward and everything are a lot looser and different than what they are with K2, because that's a brand out of New Orleans, which is a strange thing for a skier. And you did have like 5 or 6 pro models with them, but was there any travel or anything, or were you just based at home and you did whatever you wanted to do?
I think they sent me to US Open one year, but it was within the first 2 years of skis. And then I didn't go skiing for like 3 or 4 years. And I remember showing up at my dad's house, and he had like 4 Ninth Ward skis that I had never seen. And I was like, oh, sick. What? And he still has them. they could be the only pairs in the world. I don't even know how he got them.
But they're all your pro models?
He doesn't have all of them. I think there's 4 of them there. But one year they were like one ski was black and one ski was white or some bullshit like that kind of stuff.
The striped one I remember too.
Yeah, I kept thinking I was going to be like super cutting edge and get something that looked cool in the air. But then I never went skiing.
And, you know, back to that program and Bolé and everybody that you're with, I mean, is it one of those things where, like, in terms of ski money, you're taking all the product that you're getting and selling it, or is it just sitting at your dad's house?
No, I like, and at that time with the Bolé shit, like, if there was ski stuff, I think Bolé is when there was some tour that was trying to do something for 6 or 5 stops, and I won the tour of going around, and I don't even remember what the hell it was. And Bolé was stoked on that. And then Bolé, it was like they would call me and be like, we need to get a photo shoot of this and this. And I would just go do it. And like, if I had that for every company, like I would have stayed with them forever style. Like, I think it was just because I stopped skiing was why I stopped hanging out or doing anything with them. But they would be like, we need a shot of doing this and you standing there like this, and like would show up and like put a little makeup on my face or tell me to shave, and like it was easy as could be.
That sounds like the dream sponsorship for a person like yourself. It's like purely transactional.
But it was like one of the companies that I resisted riding for. Like, I don't want to ride for that trendy ass Bolé shit, you know? And then rode for him and was like, holy shit, this ain't that bad.
Yeah, you know, it's surprising what happens behind the doors of a company. Like, it's just like you can't judge a book by its cover. And you would be someone that I'm sure gets judged all the time just by your look. I didn't ask earlier, but do you have any face tattoos?
No face tattoos. And it's like most of the time I wear pretty, like at the farm, I always look like shit. But I like do my best to at least like try to wear long sleeves or button up shirts. And like, I think I get judged a bit, but maybe being in Oregon, people just always come up and like, they're like, I love your tattoos.
But you have a lot of evil tattoos. My favorite part was like that some of them were just so like dark, and I thought that was pretty cool. Do you have, like, what's the darkest, most evil tattoo that you have right now?
Oh, well, definitely the second tattoo I got was the top of the inside of my left arm's kind of like well, it's Jesus, but there's the top half of him and like 2 zombies eating it. And then like my whole left arm is like the cross, but with his legs still on it and like zombies drinking the blood of that. But it was like the first tattoo I went to get. A friend sent me a photo that you posted of me like either 17 or 18 when I got my first tattoo.
Yeah, in my living room. I've got like 4 photos from that day.
And I hadn't seen it, but I came home and my mom like saw my tattoo. And I remember her like lifting up my sleeve and being like, you got a skull with burning candles. And I wanted to get like a weird Iron Maiden K2 drawing, but it was like something that no one could tattoo because I didn't know how tattoos work.
Right.
And so I was like, I'll tattoo you this skull with candles and it'll be amazing. We'll enter it in the tattoo contest. And I was like so excited because I think I was like within 2 weeks of turning 18. But like it was right at that time. So I come home, mom's like, you got a skull with candles? That's cool. And the next tattoo I went to get, we were like sitting there coming up with like all my tattoos. I show up with an idea and then I sit there and talk for too long and then come up with a better idea. That was the better idea.
How about your girlfriend? Is she more clean cut than yourself?
Yeah, she's like from Florida and does stuff online and wakes up every morning at 5:30 and wonders how I stay up after 9 o'clock.
But way more normal than you from appearance?
Very normal. She isn't basic and boring. She goes and does all these interesting things and likes to be part of things that are happening in society and doing shit. But she definitely comes off way more polite and nice and wonderful than I do at first hand, for sure.
Well, I would think you're intimidating to a lot of people just by the way you look. And unfortunately, people judge all the time, and that's just something that will happen. But, you know, in terms of your ski career, you kind of disappear for like 5 years, just like totally off the map. Your ski career is done. It sounds like you don't even like skiing that much anymore. You're just probably skateboarding a bit here and there and doing your weed thing. But in 2014, you come back with a Dead Abetic edit. And what's the story behind that? Do you feel like getting into the game again? Because it sounds like you're going to put out a web series, but it's only one episode.
I went to Tahoe for something, and then Tanner was having a contest, and I thought I could ski again and hadn't in a long time, and like went to hit this quarter pipe, and there was like a hip behind the quarter pipe. I like kind of made the gap and then went to hit it going faster, and my legs buckled because there's no muscle there because I haven't skied.
Yeah.
And so I just shot up in the air and was going backwards. And so I tucked my knees and I like backflipped into this hit tranny that was like almost impossible. We couldn't do it again. But then Tanner letting me ski at the little contest thing. And then I ended up hanging out in Tahoe for like a week with Candine and B. Paul and Sean Fields and skiing around there. And then all of a sudden, Candine and B. Paul were like, we should go to Mammoth. And we went to Mammoth for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And it was like, I just completely learned how to ski again.
With Candide, which is pretty amazing because like the shit he's put together since Diabetic and probably before Diabetic, just fucking incredible. Mind-blowing stuff.
When he made the first one, that was that whole like 6 weeks that we were in Mammoth in June. He was just sitting on the computer because he edited the first, I don't know what his shit's called, but he just edited it every night, like making these little shots. And I had no clue what it was going to be.
And then he blew up to like the mainstream world. Like everybody knew him in skiing forever since like the late 90s, but everybody in the world knew him after those videos just because they got millions of views. And what happened with Diabetic? Was it just a one-time deal and then you realized you aren't that into it?
I think me and B-Paul made 2 of them or 3 of them, but the other ones, we would get wasted one night and there would be crazy footage of someone running through a window. And then the next day I'd be like, we should make an edit. And then sure, Tanner and Ibergen guys were like, dude, we don't want to make fucking people being drunk edits. There'd be like 15 ski tricks and someone jumping through a window. There were sick ass tricks in a couple. I don't even know where you would find them, but I remember having like so much fun. And it was like at the time, it was like Henrik and B. Paul showed up the next year and stayed in the Purple City house. And it was like maybe Scotty and Kevin and Malone and like all these Mammoth kids that just had a place, and we were just staying on their couch and like being with all the people who just skied every day. All of a sudden I was like, I want to ski, and called Iberg and was like, can we make edits? And he was like, yeah, if you want to.
Sorry, I kind of got lost in your story and I pretend like I was paying attention, but I wasn't once you said Kevin Malone, because I put a picture up of you that you mentioned on the internet not too long ago. And I was like, hey, does anybody have any questions for Rory? I don't know why I put it up there. I really didn't need questions for Rory, although when you listen to this interview, you might be like, yeah, you really did need questions for Rory. But Kevin is one of the people that asked one of the questions. And his question is, he wants to give you a shout out first for being one of the most authentic dudes in the world and one of his favorite people. And then he says, having been around everything from the Gunsmoke jump line to the Chair 5 hip that Candide and CR hit to the giant middle jump from your part in Dubski, what was your favorite park feature in Mammoth or June?
Oh, that was such a sick question. Like back in the really old days, the huge, crazy step downs at Mammoth were so fun because it was just so scary. But always the hip things at Mammoth or June where you could go over them. There was a hip at June for a while, and I think it's at the end of one of the Grenade movies or something. But I like went to go off it, and I got stuck in a rut and went straight off the jump and went to do a 3. And was like 20 feet higher in the air. And so I did a 7, and it worked where I just cleared the hip perfect.
Uh-huh.
And I remember being the most excited about that one, probably.
So that's the feature, and that's going to be the question that I probably won't do again online, but I did it and it worked for you. And the next time you really surface in the world of skiing after the Diabetic thing is at Super Park in 2016. And there's a handful of skiers invited to this one because skiers usually aren't invited to Super Park. But you aren't part of the invited crew of skiers through Free Skier magazine. You get a separate invite through Pat Bridges, who's always had a soft spot in his heart for you. And it's like Super Park is illegal for a lot of skiers to go to a lot of years, but it's always welcoming to Rory Silva.
I think it was because they first had it in Mammoth when it was like the snowboarders, and there was a couple skier guys that were allowed, and then I was allowed to go to that one. And then Bridges just was always the shit. And me and Blum, like, I've always just hung out. And I'd call Blum and he'd be like, yeah, we're sitting here. And yeah, Pat says come over, and like show up at the bar. And he'd be like, so are you going to go skiing tomorrow? And like, there were a couple times, like one year they had this huge, like maybe 120-foot jump. And I hadn't really hit jumps a whole lot in a while, and was sitting down there drinking beers with Bridges and then like talking shit about everyone being a pussy hitting that big jump. I was like, I'll go hit it. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And like, I went up to the thing and the guy was like stopping people to hit the jump. And he's like, no, you can't hit the jump. And I was like, tell Bridges I'm hitting the jump. And I'm like holding a tall can and I have no fucking poles. And he gets on the phone and Bridges laughs or whatever. And the guy's like, well, you can't. And I like hand him the beer and he goes, thank you. And I like grab another one out of my pocket and open it and just drop in staring at him and like did a 3 over the jump and it worked. And I was like, oh, that's the shit. And then tried to do a 7, but the 7 looked flaily, but it just was okay. And then like had a couple of those. And then the one year that you're talking about when Free Skier got everyone invited, and I did the same thing where I hadn't skied in a year and a half. And I showed up and was riding up the chair with Bridges and Blum, making fun of how everyone's a pussy. Maybe Jossie was with us too, the skier. And we came to this step-up jump at the stop, and I just stopped where everyone was. And Bridges and Blum kind of laughed, and I was like, oh, and like went to drop in, and I like speed checked, and everyone saw me speed check, but I didn't see me speed check. And I ran into the wall pretty hard. But like I knew I was going to hit the wall, and I don't know how I got so lucky, but like I literally hit the wall, slid down the quarter pipe and put my skis back on. It was like I was depressed, but like I wasn't hurt at all. And it was like I ran into a wall probably at like 65 feet on like a 70 or 80-foot step up quarter pipe thing.
Jesus. And you live to tell. That was 2016, and then you've kind of disappeared in the ski world for now. I mean, that's what kind of guys your age, that's what they do. But what we're going to do in the rest of the podcast is something that I call inappropriate questions. And I was able to get one of my favorite people, and he's a good friend of yours as well, into the mix. Andy Mayer is known as the Mayor of Yakima. He's doing so much that you can find out all about what Andy's doing over at mayormade.com. He didn't ask me to say that, but I looked it up just because I wanted to say that, because he is doing a shit ton of stuff.
It's sick. I was going to say Locast just told me he saw Andy at the hill like last week, and I was like, no way, I need to come up there.
We skied with him last year. We were trying to do it this year, but we didn't make it to White Pass. But you used to ski with Andy a lot. I think you guys were tight when you guys were in the same town. And I am going to play question number 1 from Andy. Here we go.
All right, question number 1. Rory, there was a time crossing the border between Canada and the United States, and the crossing guard, I believe, said that you supported terrorism. Could you talk a little farther on that topic?
Do you remember what he's talking about?
Yeah, for sure. It was like whatever they did, the Canada Big Air contest.
The WSI one?
Yeah, and I got to go up to Canada for something, and it was either that or summer shit. And me and Andy, we knew each other in Mammoth, and then like everyone who's like my best friends in the world now, including Andy, I just haven't talked to him in ages, are all like the people I see all the time, and like they were all the same crew that came down there. And he was in Canada with me, and I was like, oh, I'll get a ride back to you with America or whatever. And we were in Whistler, and I probably had like 6 or 8 joints that I rolled, and I just started smoking them, like
burning before the border?
No, we're in Whistler. So I'm like, fuck, we got 2 hours. We don't care. We'll be fine. And I just didn't know. And all of a sudden we're smoking like our second to last doobie or something. And I'm like talking shit about everything, I'm sure. And all of a sudden we pass the mirrors. Like when you're coming to the border and it shows the big mirror so you can see behind you. And I'm like, oh shit. And so we like throw the weed out and pull up to the thing, and dogs come out right away, and they like jump on the front of Andy's car, and they tell him to pull over to the side. And then we get pulled over into the back room, and that's when the dude kept telling me I support terrorism by buying marijuana. And I want to say they took Andy's car apart a little bit, but I've seen them take people's cars a lot, and it wasn't as bad, but I remember we were both just scared shitless. Like, I'm an idiot. Rory, you're an idiot. Fucking, it was such a stupid thing to do.
Yeah, totally. Was he mad or was he kind of like Andy and just kind of like quiet?
I'm sure he was mad, but I don't even remember the drive afterwards. I just remember we definitely got his car and left in his car. But it was all me just being just a kook.
That's like the nightmare going over the border and having something. It's just a shame that you knew you had something and you still did it, but whatever.
I was like literally sitting there with the thing in my hand, like talking about like, no, I just have to smoke a couple cigarettes.
And they saw that you threw the stuff out?
I would assume, because right when we pulled up, I remember it like so well that like right when the car stopped, guys came out of like both sides with their dogs and just started going by every car.
All right, we're going to go with question number 2.
I didn't realize you were a diabetic at the time. This was a time frame that I figured it out, but you ate one summer, it was Red Baron pizza, Live Wire Mountain Dew, I think it was the Orange Mountain Dew, some sort of peanut butter cereal, and I can't remember the other thing that you would eat a lot of. How did you live? How did you survive with a diet like that and being diabetic? I don't quite understand how that works.
Well, we've talked about it a little bit, but were you always feeling sick when you ate just that garbage that tastes good?
I literally ate peanut butter and bread and like Pringles, and I think my body just never had healthy things. And I still to this day don't it makes no sense how I'm like in somewhat good shape and like want to go do things all the time. And now trying to eat better things all the time and realizing how much better you feel if you like eat good food for a month or two. It's just so amazing to me how there is no explanation though.
Was there any consequences from eating bad stuff? Like, did you ever eat a ton of candy and have to be rushed to the hospital or anything like that?
If you eat a ton of candy, your blood sugar goes up. And then like one day you're going to lose your legs because you had too many high blood sugars. And if you take too much insulin, then they bring you to the hospital. And like if your blood sugar is like 2,000, you're going to go in a coma. But like you have to be a complete moron to like have your blood sugar go above like 300-400. Like,
you say that it would take a moron to make that happen, but you are the one who did drive across the border with joints. So I will throw that out there. Sorry, I'm not calling you a moron, but I just felt like I had to say that. I am going to go with his last inappropriate question. Here we go.
When you roll a spliff, what is your percentage of tobacco to weed? I imagine it's 10-1, but I want to hear it from your mouth.
Now, since you've got CBD involved, you've got to break it out into 3 percentages.
No, like weed, I like, let's say I take 7 grams of weed. I would throw like 3 grams of CBD in there. And then it's almost like either 50-50 or 60-40. But forever it was like Dean style where it was all tobacco.
So there was a time where you're only putting 10% of weed in it?
Yeah, where I would like sprinkle it like a French kid, like just being like, well, if I put some weed in it, the weed will work. And like going to other countries and skiing. Like I remember going to Japan and putting like stems in tobacco and being so excited.
Huh. I never really tried that, but well, I'm not on the tobacco kick anymore. But I should have tried it back in the day. Rory, at this point, looking back at your career, the way that you skied, it always got people so fired up. Like with airs, like I said earlier, is always like another late 180 that was totally smooth. Or on rails, there was no big jump ever leading up to the rails because you didn't think that was cool. And to me, I always knew that you were either stoned, maybe drunk, and you were crushing everything all the time. And you didn't give a fuck what anybody thought. You were just doing it how you wanted it to look and just for Rory Silva. And it was really cool until I don't see it anymore. But I'm always appreciative of getting an hour to talk to you and catch up. And I want to thank you for your time, man.
Heck yeah, I hope we can say hello again soon.
Yeah, dude. So that's the podcast. And you sound so much better than last time we talked.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it's either the girlfriend or the real job. Like, I can't curse all the time. And, like, even I notice myself cursing still all the time. And, like, we'll be like, shit, God, can't do it. You don't need to say fuck every 4 sentences.
It's just like your energy and you, like on our last conversation, it seemed like you were slurring a lot. And you're not slurring now.
Yeah, I think life is definitely in a way better place right now. Like, Work seems to be going well. I get to go ski every Thursday. I randomly ran into Pollard and all those guys recently, and so Pollard's been like randomly calling me, and he wants to make little edits with his skis.
So that was time with Rory Silva, and I, like a lot of others, have a soft spot for Rory. He's a great person, but a lot of people won't figure that out because they're too afraid to talk to him. With the head and evil tattoos, I get it. He's intimidating, but he's really a softie. He also had such an influence on others with his skiing. It's a shame he didn't take it more seriously, but whatever. The Rory will be the Rory, and he sounds so great these days. That's the show for this week. Now it's time for me to talk about the review of the week. Last week's winner gave me 1 star, and his review was an ill-thought-out attempt to tell me to not be political. And the reviewer, well, he still hasn't reached out to get his beanie yet, but he did do something else that I'm pretty stoked on. He changed his 1-star review to a 4-star review, so there's that. This week's review of the week comes from Possum1620. It's a 5-star review, and it's titled Pandemic Discovery, My New Favorite Pod. I only discovered your podcast last year, but it has quickly become my favorite. As a skier, I love the stories from all of my favorite athletes, but even more so, I enjoy the behind-the-scenes stories of the sports business world. In fact, the pod with Tim Petrick may be my favorite so far because it has everything. Ski bums, success in the ski industry, and Grateful Dead. Please keep up the good work, including asking about money. Well, Possum, I thank you for that review, and I love asking about money. And it's one of those things that half the listeners think is tacky, half the listeners think is awesome, and I'm more on the awesome side, so I'm going to continue to ask you about money. I haven't been probing as hard as I used to, and I need to get back into that, so I will try to keep that in mind for my next podcast. Possum, you can email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I will send you a beanie. All you need to do is email over that address. So I thank you very much for your review. Anyone else who's listening, please submit a review to iTunes. If you do and I read it on the air, I will send you a free beanie as well. To review me, all you need to do is hit the podcast icon on your smartphone, search for The Powell Movement, click my logo. When you see my logo, scroll down all the way to where you see the stars. You can click 1 to 5 stars and write a review. It is all greatly appreciated, and I thank you for doing it. You can also win a beanie through doing that. I also want to thank you for listening and thank my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Rollerblade, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Elon Skis. Have a great week, everyone.